Of all the galaxies of human emotions, none is trickier or more elusive to catch and decode than envy. I've made a video about envy years ago, and I made a promise that I will dive much deeper into this particular topic, as in today's idealistic digital age, it is even more critical to understand how it can involuntarily control us and slowly destroy us in the process. We humans are naturally compelled to compare ourselves with one another. Let's admit to ourselves that we are continually measuring people's status, the levels of respect and attention they receive, and any differences between what we have and what they have. It is part of our instincts for autonomy that takes care of our status of self-reliance and self-government. And despite those seemingly independent terms, they still require relatable corresponding information in order to make better judgments for our well-being or where we stand in this world. For some of us, this innate need to compare could serve as a driving force to help us excel through our work. For others, it can turn into deep feelings of inferiority and frustration that lead to covert attacks and sabotage. Nobody will admit to acting out of envy because it is socially humiliating and impairing. That is why you must recognize the early warning signs of envy, both from your own internal emittance and subtle gestures demonstrated particularly from your close friends and acquaintances. People overcome with envy will inadvertently come with a secret desire to hurt, wound, or steal from the envied person in an attempt to right the unfairness that comes with his or her supposed superiority. As mentioned before, it is socially inappropriate and despicable to vividly display envy, as it reveals the dark collection of our deep insecurities as well as the intention of hostility which will inevitably threaten those who are envied and eventually push them away. Envy entails the admission to ourselves that we are inferior to another person in something that we value, and we like to conceal it from ourselves and not be aware that it motivates our actions. It's obvious, if we genuinely don't give a damn about certain life metrics, we will be sternly indifferent towards them regardless of what happened. But if it is a metric that is super important to us, like money, status, and respect, not only is it painful to admit this inferiority, but it is even worse for others to see that we are feeling this. And so, almost as soon as we feel the initial uncomfortable itch of envy, we are motivated to disguise it to ourselves. It is not specifically our desire to become exactly like the envied person, but it is more about the unfairness and inequality at the distribution of goods and/or attention. We felt like we deserve to have as much as they do, yet feel somewhat helpless and powerless to obtain such things. Now, logically or rationally speaking, we understand that it takes hard work and years of dedication or commitment to eventually earn or deserve the finer things in life, and for the small minority, some natural talent or even a significant amount of inheritance. If we have an unmitigated, realistic view on life, we can understand that life isn't fair, and yet still, we can't help but to subconsciously engage in conflict over that practical reality and our own comfortable and fantastical ideals, which is what makes envy so dangerous. As stated before, we like to conceal envy from ourselves and other people and disregard its influence over our actions. And that naivete is what's going to eventually reveal his or her hostility to the envied person. To conceal this envy from oneself and others requires the envier to mentally convert the envied into an uncharitable character. Or in other words, in order for the envier to feel entitled to harm the envied, he or she has to create this narrative in his or her mind that everything that the other person does reveals some negative trait, and because of that they are undeserving of what they have. Now, the ironic thing is that when we think about someone who is envious of another person, we generally tend to think that if someone doesn't fancy another person, then the next logical step would be just to stay away from that person, right? Just try to avoid and never make further contact with that person, right? Well, no. Paradoxically, those with the strongest form of envy actually tend to put themselves much closer to the envied, because the desire to steal from them, sabotage them, or become hostile towards them is a lot more potent. You have what they want most, and that makes the itch just too irresistible to not scratch for them. You gentlemen might have seen the general example of this in social media, where those who display their dislike of someone is constantly present on the comment section of the social media page of the envied person, continuously discrediting what that person is doing or what that person has in his or her life like they have nothing more important or better to do in their lives. Now, that is just the general example, but that only serves as the appetizer for the much more lustfully dangerous individuals. That is why the greatest of all enviers are your closest friends, whom you've known for many years and have given them your utmost trust. For within friendship, they are much better positioned to sabotage us, steal our resources and spouse, and spread false rumors about us. Once they attack us, we tend to feel guilty and confused, as if we are deserving of this harm. because our trust in them creates room for compromise in the form of us highly considering their opinions, criticisms, and affirmations, as we like to assume they quote-unquote know us better than anyone. Through highly trusting an individual, we create some form of dependency from them, as we value them to an extent where we are unable to totally disconnect from them since they seemingly play a quote-unquote huge role or part within our lives. We become massively uncomfortable in disregarding or dismissing them altogether, and if we respond angrily to their criticisms, this only feeds the narrative of our unlikable nature. As I've said before, envy is the trickiest of all human emotions to become aware of and catch in the act. And the reason for this is because of their covert and vague elusiveness, as we never express envy directly. Unlike anger or sadness, where it is much more vivid to decode through demeanors, facial expressions, and body language, envy is extremely subtle and contradicting when displayed, and that caused us to become too unsure to judge and eventually got us to become ignorantly dismissive of our worries. But those worries are what you should pay attention to, especially in today's generation as people are becoming much more political and indirect. They are able to control any overt aggressive impulses and disguise what they're feeling. That is why it is critical for us to have the ability to spot anyone envious in real time who have hostile intentions against us. There are many ways to spot envy directly, chief among which is to identify minute inconsistencies and slight contradictory gestures. As when people first experience envy, they have not yet fooled themselves into thinking it is something else, and so they are more prone to leakage at that moment than later on. You can bait them to exposing themselves by telling them good news about yourself with regards to important life matters that involve status. Whether it is a promotion at work, landing a great opportunity, or getting yourself a really good-looking partner. Here, first impression is key. Notice if they have a slight disappointment in their expression or vocal tone, like a smile that fades away too quickly, a congratulatory statement that is too discreet or feels forced, and more importantly, the eyes. If you don't see any sign of light, or if their eyes didn't widen and they glance down at your feet instead of maintaining eye contact when they respond to you, it is a definitive sign of envy. Because at that very moment, they vividly realize the itch of their envy and are putting more focus in trying to swiftly hide their emotions from you than to interact with you. Those who are genuinely happy for your success or fortune would give a blunt and passionate praise for your determined character, and also be enthusiastic to hear the detailed story behind it from your end. And now that I mention them, those are the next two signs you need to pay close attention to. When it comes to praise, if they praise you through a seemingly insincere or sarcastic praise, and when the focus of that praise is on the materialistic side of your success and not your effort or amount of work and hardships that you've went through, that is a definitive sign of envy. As a person who is genuinely inspired by your successes, they would want to know what it takes to get there instead of what you got out of it. And they usually ask questions in the likes of, how the hell did you do that? Or, how long does it take you to get there? Basically questions or comments relating to their grind and efforts. However, when they comment excessively and exaggeratively about the huge amount of money you'll be making, the high-end people you're going to be connecting with, the attractive people you're going to have the opportunity to meet, or the timely luck that you receive, it is a very clear sign that they put more attention in what you have way more than who you are as a person. The other sign is much easier to spot. As I've said before, people want to hear the story behind your successes. But you have to differentiate those who want to hear it for inspiration and those who want to hear it for personal approbation. Those who want to hear it for inspiration will focus on the arduous physical and mental struggles that take place before the successes. And those who want to hear it for personal approbation or satisfaction will focus on all the possible risks and misfortunes that might take place after the successes. Because their intention to focus on those negativities is not as it initially appears to be, such as so that they can assist you in spotting potholes and make your life easier as you move forward into further prospering. They're actually just trying to feed their hostile hope by implanting you with worries, paranoia, and tentativeness, in order to give them some form of assurance that you will eventually slip away and fail. Now, of course, it is not just about spotting people that are consumed by envy. It is also about catching yourself becoming unhealthily envious towards someone else. As explained before, we all will inevitably compare ourselves with others. We all will feel morbidly unsettled to some degree by those who are superior in some areas that we put a high amount of esteem into, and we all react to this by feeling some form of envy. Most of the time, you are simply being dishonest with yourself, as you are only conscious of the indignation or resentment you feel that covers up that initial itch of envy. Do a simple favor for yourself. Next time you hear or read about the sudden success of someone in your professional field or among your friends, notice the inevitable feeling of wanting the same form of success and the subsequent feeling of spite and hostility, however vague, towards the person you envy. It happens very quickly, and you can easily miss the transition to when you try to hide it from expressing it, but try to catch it before you do so. It is perfectly natural for you to go through this emotional sequence, and there should be no guilt attached to this. It is what makes us human. Monitoring yourself and seeing more of those emotional tendencies about yourself will only help you in the slow process of overcoming envy or moving on from envy. Admit to yourself and realize that it is almost impossible to rid ourselves of the compulsion to compare ourselves with others. It is too ingrained in our nature as a social animal, as even monkeys do feel envy. Instead, what we must aspire to do is to slowly transform our comparing inclination and the emotions that comes with it into something positive, productive, and pro-social. Transmutation of negative emotions into productive endeavors, seeing the imperfections of all the things that you envy from a much closer point of view, and learning to admire human greatness are some of the ways to quench that thirst and disassociate the satisfaction of our lives purely from our own individual circumstances of success and achievements. What we think we want may not necessarily always fulfill us the moment we get them. We are just externally fueled and single-mindedly blinded by all the idealistic possibilities surrounding them. Especially in this digital age of social media, where everything can be seductively and fantastically marketed to get you clinically obsessed to chase after them. Being extensively envious is very similar to continuously biting your tongue while attempting or causing harm to the envied person. You may or may not get to hurt that person, but at the same time, undoubtedly, you are also making yourself bleed in the process. Because every time you act upon your envious impulses, you are also painfully and shamefully admitting all the shortcomings that imminently sabotage all of your confidence and self-worth like an anvil. Thank you for watching.